To everyone. Today, our topic focuses on interviewing guidelines, particularly for information gathering interviews, which are commonly discussed in functional English. These guidelines are very important because they help interviews collect accurate information, maintain a respectful environment, and ensure that the interview flows smoothly and professionally. The information gathering interviews are used in many situations such as research projects, fact finding, verification of information, and general data collection. In this type of interviews, the goal is not to evaluate the interviewee for a job, but to obtain clear, reliable, and complete information. And because of this purpose, the guidelines we follow emphasize setting the right tone, asking appropriate questions, listening actively, and maintaining professionalism throughout the interview process. For today's discussion, I will focus on the general interviewing guidelines, specifically the initial setup and tone, as well as the do's and don'ts of conducting an effective and ethical interview. Now, let us begin with the initial setup and tone, which is one of the most important aspects of an information gathering interview. The initial setup includes everything that happens before the actual question starts. This part of interview is crucial because the first few minutes can decide whether the interviewee will feel comfortable sharing honest and detailed answers. So the first guide is to establish the tone of the interview. So the tone is the atmosphere you create, whether the conversation feels relaxed, formal, friendly, or serious. In information gathering interviews, the tone should be professional, calm, respectful, and friendly. For example, if you are interviewing a schoolmate for a research project, starting the conversation with a smile, greeting them politely, and showing that you are approachable will make them more comfortable and willing to share their thoughts. The purpose of this guideline is to make the interviewee feel safe and at ease so they can speak freely. Next, it is important to inform the interviewee of the purpose of the interview because people cooperate better when they understand why they are being interviewed. You should explain the goal of the interview, the topic being discussed, and how their answers will be used. For instance, you might say, "Hi, I'm interviewing you for our English project about the study habits." Your answers will help us understand how students manage their time. The main purpose here is to avoid confusion and make the interviewee aware of the direction of the conversation. The third guideline is to emphasize that their knowledge and opinions are important. This is because sometimes interviews may doubt whether their response are relevant. So as an interviewer, you should make them feel that their answers matter. You can say, "We really need your opinion because you have experience with this topic and your insights will help us a lot." And this encourages more detailed and thoughtful answers. Another important guideline is to gain and maintain the interviewee's trust and cooperation. Trust is essential in any information gathering interview. So you can build trust by being polite, showing respect, maintaining eye contact, and avoiding judgment. For example, if the interviewee shares something unusual or unexpected, do not react with surprise or laughter. Simply acknowledge their response and continue professionally. The purpose of this guideline is to make the interviewee feel that the space is safe, neutral, and judgment free. It is also important to explain what will happen to the information gathered. Let the interviewee know whether the information will be used for a class report, a research paper, or a presentation. This encourages transparency and reassures the interviewee that their response are being handled responsibly. Move on to the sixth guideline, which is to identify any confidentiality or restricted information, because not all information is meant to be shared publicly. So clarify which responses will remain private. For example, you might say, everything you share will remain confidential and will only be used for our research report. And this assures the interviewee that their identity and answers are protected. Seventh, you should assure the interview that honesty is valued and the information will be verified. So encourage them to answer thoughtfully without fear of judgment. You can say, there's no right or wrong answers. We just want to understand your experience. So this helps promote accuracy and reduces pressure on the interviewee. And finally, the eighth initial setup and tone, it is essential to make clear that there are no negative consequences for participating. That is because people must know that their participation will not affect their grades, relationships, or any other standing. For example, you might say, this interview won't affect anything about your standing in class, so you are free to answer honestly. So the purpose of this guideline is to remove fear and encourage openness. In summary, the initial setup and tone is critical for an information gathering interview. A strong setup builds trust, clarifies expectations, and creates a comfortable environment which allows the interviewee to speak freely and provide accurate information. By establishing the right tone and following these steps, an interviewer ensures that the interview is productive, professional, and ethical. Now, let us continue and further deepen our understanding of the do's and don'ts in interview. These guidelines shape how smoothly an interview flows, how accurate the information becomes, and how professional the interaction remains. Let us begin with the don'ts of an interview, or the things we should avoid. First, do not assume anything. In interviews, guessing or jumping to conclusions leads to inaccurate information. If something is unclear, we ask. We don't fill in details with personal assumptions. For example, if someone pauses often, we should not assume they are unprepared. It could simply mean they are thinking carefully, and information must come from the interviewee, not from our imagination. Second, do not form prejudgments. We must avoid judging someone based on appearance, tone, or background. When we judge too quickly, we become biased, and that bias affects how we interpret answers. A nervous speaker might still hold very valuable ideas, so we must listen without labeling. Third, do not interrupt. Interruptions stop the interviewee's thoughts, process, and may cause them to forget important details. Even if we think we already know what they're trying to say, we give them the time and space to finish. Our goal is to let them express fully, not to rush them. Last but not the least, do not go off on tangents. We must stay on focus and avoid long unrelated conversations. Interviews are sometimes comfortable and people may drift, but as interviewers, we gently guide the discussion back to the main topic. This ensures that our time is used wisely and productively. And that's it for the don'ts. Now moving on, let us move to the do's of interview, or the practices we should apply consistently. So 1. Ask questions that begins with who, what, where, when, why, and how. So these types of questions are called open-ended questions that encourage detailed responses rather than yes or no answers, which allows us to gather fuller and richer information. For instance, Instead of asking, "Did you enjoy the event?" Because it will lead to a short answer. So try asking, "How did the event impact you?" So from the question, "How did the event impact you?" this invites a deeper reflection and storytelling. However, open-ended questions cannot stand alone, which is why it should be balanced because an effective interview also uses both open and closed-ended questions. Open questions explore experiences, while closed questions confirm details. For example, asking, "How would you describe your experience?" We may clarify for more detailed answer, we may clarify that, "So, you have been working there for 3 years, correct?" Para ma-ensure that we gather both depth and accuracy. It also sets the tone that makes it conversational. Another essential guideline is verifying understanding through probing or clarifying questions. So even when answers seem complete, misunderstandings may occur. So we ask follow-up questions such as, "Just to clarify, you mean?" Or you can say, "Can you elaborate on that?" Because probing allows the interviewer to capture the full picture without guessing or assuming. Additionally, we must act in a friendly but professional manner. Being warm makes the interviewee feel comfortable, while maintaining professionalism shows respect and seriousness. Too casual and the interview loses structure, while too formal and the interview may feel tense. So, the proper balance is achieved through polite tone, eye contact, a calm voice, and a respectful language. Another critical practice is active listening. Listening is not just hearing, it involves paying attention, full attention, and responding with cues like, "I see," "Go on," or we can say, "That's interesting," because active listening builds trust and ensures that the interviewee feel valued, which results in more open and honest answers. Along with listening, we must take notes carefully and unobtrusively. Notes are necessary for accuracy, but writing too much or too visibly can break connection and feeling distracting. So, magsige kag suwat din ha niya, nagsige pag tubag ang imuhang gi-interview, murag distracting rasad kaayo siya, so dili lang pud siya palab-anan. Instead, we record only key points while staying engaged with the speaker. We must also avoid confrontation. The goal of the interview is to learn and not to argue. If something is unclear or contradicting, we ask gently instead of challenging aggressively because a confrontational response like, "That doesn't sound true," can be replaced with, "Could you help me understand that better?" Because these questions, these approaches, keeps the environment open and respectful. Kay ug mangisog ka din ha, mo imuha siyang i-confront kay abi ang iyang answer wala na align sa imuhang standard. So, ma-tense bitaw ang imuhang gi-interview and might as well mahadlok na siya mutubag sa imuha. And during an interview, the interviewee should do most of the talking. The purpose is to gather their information, not to share our own. So we ask, they answer, we guide, they speak, and for this to occur naturally, we must build and maintain rapport. This is very necessary because a comfortable interviewee shares more deeply while a tense one tends to hold back. So small conversation, polite tone, and genuine interest help create this trust. Still, even with the rapport, the interviewee or the interviewer must maintain control of the conversation. It is important to keep the discussion on track, and if the interviewee goes off topic, we genuinely guide them back with a statement like, "That's interesting, but may we return to blah blah blah." So, respecting time is another professional responsibility. Sticking on the agreed schedule shows courtesy, and if more time is needed, we respectfully ask if an extension or follow-up interview can be arranged. And finally, an interview must always end positively, so we thank the interviewee for their insights, acknowledge their contribution, and keep the door open for future clarifications or follow-ups if needed. Throughout every step, beginning, middle, and end, politeness and courtesy remain essential. Respect, proper questioning, balance, listening, and professionalism are what transform a simple conversation into a successful information gathering interview. And that's it for the information gathering interview, the interviewing guidelines. Thank you everyone. This video is too long and I hope nga naarasad mo nakuha sa lesson nga ako ang gi-discuss. Thank you and God bless.